I know you guys have been here for a long time, so a couple more questions, and then we'll have the hip-hop party. J.D.
Paul, I know you alluded to it as a common fact that there are so many minorities or people who can't afford extra defense who end up getting incarcerated compared to those who can afford defense but not getting involved. Obviously, that's a problem that we all know about. What are your thoughts on solutions to address that problem?
Yeah, well, my friend John is here, who trains public defenders in the South, many of whom are some of the best lawyers you could hope to have. In fact, my lawyer, the best lawyer in D.C., was a former public defender. So the first thing to do is to note how great so many public defenders are, but they just don't have the funding in a lot of cities that they need. In D.C., they do. They happen to, for various political reasons, have that funding. So D.C. has the best public defense service in the United States. Other places, especially in the South, not so great. So the most important thing to do is to fund lawyers for poor people. And when we talk about the dysfunctional politics of criminal justice, you know, we understand how difficult that turns out to be. I remember, I don't know if there's anyone here from the what was then the Southern Prisoners Defense Committee, is now the Southern Human Rights Organization. Anybody here from there? John, I know you've spent some, yeah, and Carla, my friend Carla Friend, used to work there. Very quickly, one of the cases I worked on as a summer intern there had to do with a lawsuit against a county in Georgia that legally, of course, if you're a poor person, you have the right to a lawyer, right? So for people who were charged with capital offenses, crimes for which, if they were guilty, they could be executed, this district had to have a way to provide lawyers. And what they did was a low bidding system. So whatever lawyer bid the lowest amount for the case got the case. And that's kind of an example of what happens to poor people. I walked away from my experience thinking, you know, it was nice that I was innocent, but I'm not sure that was the most important fact for my acquittal. I'd say by far the most important fact was my expensive and very good lawyer. So it's almost like you'd rather have you'd rather be guilty and have a great lawyer than be innocent and have a not good lawyer. How about two more questions? Yes.
So I was curious as to how your recovery has been like. I mean, I know I get falsely accused by like a sibling that for like two Thanksgivings. So I was just, you know, what has that process been like for you? Are you still going through it? Is it done?
Well, I wrote a book. You know, I mean, the answer is yes and no. So, you know, you hate to say it's not a big deal because it was a big deal. One of the things I do when I think about hip-hop and criminal law is to understand that now for a lot of young black men, it's not a big deal to get arrested. So the hip-hop slang for getting arrested is called catching a case, kind of like catching a cold, not such a big deal. You know, it's a little bit your fault, but a little bit just what happens, shit happens. And I don't feel like that. It was a big deal. I never talked about this. This happened more than 10 years ago. And I never talked about it until I wrote this book, and I'm speaking about it in front of large audiences. But my students, I teach criminal law, I teach criminal procedure, I teach race, racism, and the law. So all of this is relevant, right, to that, but I never talked about it. So there is something, wounded sounds kind of too tragic, but it is a big deal. And I'm recovered, I'm doing great, but the fact that, again, 14 million people get arrested every year in the United States, about half of the people who are locked up are there for nonviolent drug crimes, and it's not doing them or us any good to be locked up for that. So even more important than kind of, you know, my minor trauma is the trauma that this over-incarceration inflicts in our country. And to answer one last answer to the gentleman's question about is there any reason for optimism, at this point the best reason for optimism is We can't afford it anymore. It costs about $60,000 a year to lock up people. If you multiply that by the more than 2 million people who are locked up, imagine if we spent that money on health care, on education, on job training. In the Bronx, they have these blocks that are called $1 million blocks, because if you take all of the people who live in that block who are in the system, the government is actually spending $1 million on that block. So the idea is, how about spending that money to improve their schools, to give them health care, give them job training?